Welcome to the party. You found the Mouse Castle Lounge, the place to be for good times and great conversations from the world of Disney. The bar is open, your table is waiting, and drinks are now being served. Come on in. And now, here's your host, the keeper of the Mouse Castle Lounge, Tim Calloway.
Welcome to the lounge. It's January 15th, 2016, and I'm Tim Calloway. This is our first show of the new year, and we've got two first-rate guests with us today. To talk about the significant changes happening at Disneyland with the coming of Star Wars Land are Disney historian Sam Gennawey and multimedia reporter with the Orange County Register, Mark Eades. But first, stay up to date with everything in the Mouse Castle by following us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Mouse Castle. On Twitter, I'm Disney Tim, and the Mouse Castle is also on Tumblr, Pinterest, and Instagram. Share your questions and comments by emailing us at podcast@themousecastle.com or call our listener line at 702-475-5MCL. That's 702-475-5625. And of course, you can always visit the blog at themousecastle.com, where you can download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app for your mobile device. Just click the pic that says, "Get the app." Star Wars Land is officially under construction at Disneyland. This week, to make way for the 14-acre addition to the park's northwest corner, several sections of the park were closed, some temporarily, some permanently. The rivers of America will be drained and rerouted, resulting in a shorter trip around a smaller Tom Sawyer Island. That project will take at least a year, which means no Mark Twain, no Columbia, no canoes, no island rafts, and no Fantasmic during that time. The Disneyland Railroad will also take a hiatus so the track around the river can be reconfigured. Big Thunder Ranch and the Big Thunder BBQ, gone forever. Their footprints expected to become the gateway to Star Wars Land. What will we get when the dust finally settles? The largest single-themed land expansion in Disneyland history, featuring two e-ticket attractions, one that puts you in the middle of a battle between the First Order and the Resistance, another that puts you behind the controls of the Millennium Falcon. The changes don't come without controversy, though. While many hail the arrival of a galaxy far, far away at the happiest place on Earth, others are less than enthusiastic, feeling this is a sea change that alters the very core of what makes Disneyland, Disneyland. What my first guest, Disney historian Sam Gennawey, calls the park's historic DNA. I spoke with Sam a week ago, when guests were still clamoring for one final float around the river and one final Grand Circle tour. I also spoke with multimedia reporter Mark Eades with the Orange County Register. Mark has written extensively about Disneyland and is a former Imagineer himself. He knows his stuff. Sam Gennawey and Mark Eades offer two distinct viewpoints about what may be the most significant expansion in Disneyland history. They're my guests today in the Mouse Castle Lounge. With me now is Disney historian and noted author of such books as The Disneyland Story and Universal vs. Disney, Sam Gennawey. How you doing today, sir?
I am doing absolutely marvelous.
Good. Yes, we were talking, offline earlier, and a beautiful day in Southern California after days of rain. So you're getting out and enjoying it today.
I am, but I'm not going to Disneyland because there's going to be way too many people down there today.
Everybody is going to be down there to see the end, or at least temporarily, of the rivers of America and the Mark Twain and the Columbia and Big Thunder Island, Trail and Tom Sawyer Island and all of that. And I mean, how are you feeling about this? Is this a moment of excitement? Is this a moment of despair or something somewhere in between?
Listeners, as you know, I'm sort of into the historic DNA of what Walt Disney was trying to create down at Disneyland, and I see this actually as a significant shift away from his original vision of what he thought Disneyland was supposed to be. Now, I'm sure that there's lots of good business reasons, and of course the park has to stay relevant so that it can stay popular and all that kind of stuff. But this is a big change. This is a real significant change to what the park is, what the park is about, what the experience of Disneyland is, and so I don't know. I'm looking forward to the new additions. I'm sure they're going to do an absolutely fabulous job. I'm sure the two new e-ticket attractions are going to be stellar. They're going to have to be. But overall, it's kind of sad days here in the Samland house.
From the whole historical perspective. Now, obviously, the rivers of America over the years have undergone changes, certainly not as significant as what we're about to see. But how does that fit in the whole historical context of how that part of the park has developed over the years?
Actually, if you look at a lot of photos, historic photos of Frontierland, you'll see it has evolved considerably since the beginning of the park, and there have been some really major changes to it. So this is big, but sometimes it's sort of the hype is overtaking the reality here. The fact of the matter is the Disneyland itself, when Walt conceived the idea, is that he conceived the idea of being before there were multiplex theaters, a multiplex theater, or like a television where you can change the channels to go to different genres. So if you want to watch a Western, you'd go into Frontierland. If you want to watch a Disney cartoon, you'd go into Fantasyland. If you want a science fiction adventure, you'd go into Tomorrowland. And within those genres, there would be either original material or there would be intellectual properties that are respective of what the genre was that it fit inside of. And that was the basis of the park. And it was very much about going into the genres. The Universal Studios, because I've written about them as well, they were always about the intellectual property. You didn't go visit Universal Studios to go to see Universal Studios per se. You went because there was a new Jaws there or King Kong was there. And so you were going to see a particular property. So this is a shift away from genres to a specific intellectual property. That's really big. As far as Frontierland, it was always the largest land in Disneyland. It took up the most landscape. The one piece that has always remained original was Tom Sawyer Island, which was hand-drawn by Walt himself. And it was originally going to be a Mickey Mouse Club island where you'd be able to go and watch the Mickey Mouse Club being filmed. That was the original intention. Then it was going to be little miniature models of famous American landmarks, so that as you're going around the rivers of America, you would see famous buildings like Monticello and stuff like that. And then ultimately became a real great invention with Tom and Sawyer Island, which was that Walt recognized that his park had a lot of structure, but children have a tendency to not want to be in structured environments all the time. So he was going to give the parents a break by creating an island where there's only one way on and off the island, although that did change. There was a couple of ways on and off. And then you could let your kids go run free while you just sat under a shady tree and watched the rest of Disneyland. So it was an acknowledgement that people are people and that they want to play. Apparently that's not the case anymore. And then the whole area where Bear Country is, Critter Country is, that has evolved. The train track has moved more than 100 feet west at some point. And then all of where Big Thunder Mountain was of course Nature's Wonderland, which was the living desert. So actually the whole area has changed quite a bit. There's only a couple of little teeny tiny pieces that remain from the original Frontierland, and even many of the original trees have fallen down over the years as well.
And even the flagpole right there as you enter the Ford entrance in Frontierland, which got backed into by a truck, as I recall.
Yeah. So, the only things that are really genuinely original in Frontierland are where that little pin trading store that was when you walk in on the right-hand side, that old outpost, the facades, the structures of the building along the boardwalk that's there, that's all remained. The location for the Mark Twain dock has remained the same, but really beyond that, most everything else has changed over the years.
And of course, prior to Critter Country and Bear Country, there was the Indian Village on that northwest corner of the park.
Oh, yeah, that's moved around a bunch, too. That moved around 4 or 5 times over the years. So that's kind of shifted around. And, remember, adding New Orleans Square was no, small, mean feat. That whole half of the park. So when they say the biggest expansion, well, you did have New Orleans Square. You had the Haunted Mansion. You had Pirates of the Caribbean. That was certainly, I would suggest, is probably a fairly large expansion to the area, wouldn't you? Critter Country, which is Bear Country with Winnie the Pooh, or Winnie in rehab is what I like to call that dock. Winnie needs an intervention. He don't give him more honey, you guys. He doesn't need any more honey.
But what happens? He gets more honey. So
he gets more honey.
We're just a bunch of enablers. That's all it is.
Isn't it sad? That's how I think of that ride now. And then of course Splash Mountain, which is an excellent ride. So the reality is the whole area has changed quite a bit. What I think is changing isn't so much the physical changes, because that's always happened. It is a structural DNA change. The fact that you're going to enter in a immersive space inside of Disneyland. This isn't to be exclusive of the other parks, but inside of Disneyland, that's a specific property and not genre based, is the thing I'm just still trying to get over.
The thing about it, though, is that we knew from the moment that Bob Iger announced the deal to acquire Lucasfilm that something like this was going to happen eventually at some sort of a Disney park. Assuming that Sam Gennawey could run Disneyland for a day. I mean, what would an alternative be? And I'm kind of optimistic. I'm trying to be real open-minded about this. It's not like the Rivers of America and the Mark Twain and all that is completely going away. Tom Sawyer Island is not going away. They're being significantly changed, but they're still going to be there.
Yeah.
But if you had this Star Wars property that you want to build some sort of theme park extravaganza around, how would you do it? What do you think would be better than what they're proposing now?
Oh, you're asking a historian to try to project as an armchair Imagineer? Interesting.
Go for it.
I usually try to avoid the sort of speculation. What would I do that I think that would make Disneyland continue to be relevant, and yet still sort of retain its original DNA? The first thing I would do is I would look around and recognize, Fantasyland's pretty good. Frontierland's actually in pretty good shape right now. Adventureland is the little teeny tiny corridor it's always been, so it seems to be in pretty good shape. Boy, Tomorrowland really sucks. Tomorrowland, if you were to ask somebody what is the theme of Tomorrowland, I think that it would be impossible for somebody to say what it is. It's officially known as Imagination and Beyond, but that's pretty ambiguous. I would do something with Tomorrowland. Now, I wouldn't put Star Wars necessarily in Tomorrowland. What I would do is I would turn Tomorrowland in the Stark Expo. So that would give them the opportunity to deal with their Marvel fetish and be able to monetize Marvel, which they can't do on the East Coast, but they can do on the West Coast. And so that's the first thing I would do. And the nice thing about turning Tomorrowland into the Stark Expo is that the Stark Expo is based on Tomorrowland. So they're basically going to be recreating Walt's mid-1960s super optimistic Tomorrowland that's all white and happy and bubbly and, very optimistic feeling. And then they can stick all their Marvel characters in it and it would fit perfectly. And they can also show off new technology that isn't real new technology, therefore avoiding the problem of tomorrow catching up too fast to Tomorrowland. They can do the sort of fantasy technology that one sees in all of the Marvel movies these days as well. So that would end up fixing Tomorrowland. It would allow them to monetize Marvel. It would really add to the park, and it's more genre because the genre is Tomorrow Vision, and then they can stick anything they want in there. I mean, you could stick Big Hero 6 inside of the Stark Expo, and he would fit
also a Marvel property.
And also a Marvel property. Yeah. So that's what I would do there. I think that the reason that they didn't do a third gate for Star Wars is simple. They're going to spend a lot of money on lovely facades. They're going to spend a lot of money, but they're only going to build 2 rides. They don't have enough rides to justify a park. I mean, they're going to, even if these 2 rides are the fastest, the biggest things that they could come up with capacity, Disney's current history shows that you're going to get maybe 3,000 people an hour through those 2 rides, maybe 3,500 people an hour through those 2 rides, or roughly the amount of the People Mover in Florida. Mm-hmm. So they kind of got themselves stuck by not wanting to do large investments on B attractions, so they couldn't turn it into a whole land. Personally, Star Wars deserves its own little space. But if I were going to go genre specific, then I would stick it at California Adventure, because that's what California Adventure has become. It has become Disney's version of a Universal Park. It is, you walk into now Radiator Springs. You would be able to walk into whatever that environment, but those environments are generally very specific places at California Adventure.
Yeah, and there isn't the flow at California Adventure that you have at Disneyland. It's more of a hodgepodge of different environments and different elements.
Right, right. So it would fit better there. The idea that you could pass through a portal into that back, because they have the room for it back there. If you were able to pass through the portal and then you're entering that intellectual property, it would allow a differentiation between the two parks, which is essential, which is that Disneyland stays as genre and California Adventure becomes the intellectual property driven project. And so it'll allow them to find I think a better balance between the two. But that's the thing is that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
The reality is that you're at some point in the future, there's going to be a big, giant, beautiful wall that you're going to pass through some sort of portals, just like Diagon Alley in Florida at Universal Studios. You're going to enter on the other side of that berm. You're going to be engrossed in what I'm sure is going to be absolutely wonderful theming. I'm curious to see how they pull it off because Star Wars fans are freaks like Harry Potter fans, and any inconsistency is going to be highly noted and over exaggerated. So good luck with that, Imagineers. And then I'm also curious to see, because Star Wars stretches over many decades, centuries really, and which time period do they pick? Or is it going to be a sampling of different areas from different movies?
I mean, from what I've read about it is they've created like this totally independent outpost that's not in and of itself part of any existing Star Wars canon. They're creating a whole new location that would be like the jumping off point for these other other places. That's at least how I understand it, which I think is probably the smart way to go.
Yeah, because if they get stuck having to pick a certain time or period, because I think one of the real successes of the Harry Potter attractions, which is ultimately what this is to compete against, is that was designed primarily not only with the folks at Universal Creative, but was really directed by Stuart Craig, the set designer, who, like the old-fashioned Imagineers, knew nothing about regular architecture. He knew how to make beautiful sets that conveyed the story. And so the Harry Potters the stores, for instance, are undersized because that's what's the story is about, and you have to wait in a line to get into it. So if they can do that sort of real storytelling, I think that Disney will be in pretty good shape. As I say, I'm still a fan of the park. I think they're going to do a brilliant job. It sort of fundamentally changes things. I'm an old man. I like going on the Mark Twain. I wrote much of the Disneyland story sitting on the life preservers on the second level of the Mark Twain going around because it was a very convenient place. Well, we talked when we had our last talk. We were sitting by the rivers of America. And I sat, there was a couple of boxes on the other side on Tom Sawyer Island that looked into Frontierland. And I knew I could go, and I had a clean bathroom nearby. I could have a soda, and I would take my laptop with me. And I did a lot of writing of the Disneyland story in Frontierland. So
nice.
That's why I have a special connection to it.
Yeah. I mean, earlier this week, I went down there to, take a final ride before it's closed down. And but I got there early, and I went down to the Hungry Bear restaurant, and there's no one there right after opening, and sat down on the lower level riverside there, and just kind of enjoy the quiet. That's the one thing I like about being a regular visitor to Disneyland. I don't have to visit Disneyland like a day guest does. So when the park opens and everybody's racing straight through the castle of Fantasyland or making a right turn and going to Tomorrowland in that part of the park, I'm making a left turn and enjoying some quiet over in Frontierland.
I'm with you on that. I was really fortunate. I went a couple of days ago, and I absolutely had to do the canoes because of all the different things coming back. Somehow or other, if the canoes never came back, it wouldn't surprise me, just because it's a low capacity ride and all that kind of stuff. And so that's the one that I fear the most. That's going to get kind of left off of the rehab.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the canoes because you get a real unique point of view of the rivers of America. Usually the cast members are really funny on the canoes because they have to motivate you because you're really moving the boat.
Yes.
So I think that the cast members of the canoes are some of the absolute most talented ones in the park, and certainly the funniest. And this one guy, his name was Ben, as we were going past the friendly Native American village, turning going, "Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's the Lakota of Tatooine over there." and
how appropriate his name was Ben.
Yeah, and it just put it into perspective. that's true. That's going to be part of the Star Wars area. You could get a real sense of just how much of that area is going to get pushed behind whatever that berm was. So yes, the Lakota tribe of Tatooine is going to be pushed off to a different reservation in just a matter of a couple of days. So I think that's been the path of American history. We've always been leading towards a new frontier. This time we're going to jump up into space. So I guess Star Wars is the right way. But I, for one, am an old man. I will miss my old man Disneyland. I will miss my very calm little rides. And I will remember them fondly. And then when I miss them too much, I'll just go back to the Disneyland Story, the unofficial guide to the evolution of Walt Disney's dream, and just reread what it used to be like.
There you go. Go get that whole nostalgia trip going on. Well, Sam, I appreciate your insight. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. And a year from now or 2 years from now, we'll see what happens in that part of the park.
I'm ready to get in the line now.
Yeah, I think the line is starting now.
Probably. Thank you very much, Sam. Glad to be back.
All right, thanks, Sam. Have a great day. Mark Eades is my next guest, and he wastes no time telling me exactly what he thinks about altering the rivers of America.
I'm going to be straight with you. And if you read my review of the Mark Twain, which, I'm doing ride reviews.
Right.
It's a boring ride.
Yesterday when I was at the park, I made a point, and a lot of it was for nostalgia's sake. Yes, absolutely. Sure. I want to get a last look at it before all the changes come in and remember it the way it was. How do I feel about them cutting a section of it off and rerouting it, all that? I don't know yet. I haven't seen it. I'm concerned. I mean, only because it's what I grew up with, and none of us likes change. Let's be honest. But something, they're doing something incredible on the back side of that. So, I mean, that's something to embrace. But anyway, I'm on the Mark Twain, and I wrote it a couple of times, shot some video, and I'm thinking kind of like you are now. It's like, well, yeah, there's not a whole lot going on back here when you get to the backside or the north side of the rivers of America. And it's like, I see where they could maybe cut off a section of Tom Sawyer Island and shorten it. It was making sense to me. And I know there are, extreme Disney fans are out there that are going to say that's sacrilege, but I'm thinking, no, you're not getting it. The trade-off is we're going to get something we assume or we anticipate is going to be much better, very state-of-the-art, without compromising what's there already. It's not like the Mark Twain of the Rivers of America are going away. They're not. They're being they're being tweaked.
Well, and part of the problem is this is something they're conveniently avoiding. If you're going to do the whole Frontierland, Westerland, they had to take a lot of stuff out just because of whether you call it political correctness or better awareness of what it was back then. Mm-hmm. You can't have Indian war parties.
You can't have the burning settlers cabin anymore, with the guy with the arrow in his back. That just doesn't fly anymore.
I appreciate what Kim Irvine did a nice job when they redid it, but it's still riding the rivers of America is after you get past the Mike Fink cabin, which I wish they had some animation on it, is a museum. Ostensibly it is a museum, and I'm sorry. Disneyland's not a museum, and it shouldn't be. It is a place families can go to enjoy. Now, shorten it, okay, I would also want, I've felt this forever. There's nothing going on the Mark Twain. You should have some walk-around characters on that ship all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's a boring ship.
I saw Tiana on the first trip around the Mark Twain yesterday, but then she got off and she walked away, and there was no characters on the boat for the next group of people that got on.
You could create personas of like the riverboat gamblers, just in fun. You know what I mean? Just bring that ship to life a little bit. They kind of do it with the Columbia, right? Well, I would do it even more so, and just make it an experience. That way you don't have to deal with the fact that you really can't put much on the shore to make it interesting to look at. And even what they do have, come on. Well, even the beaver that was working in the dam isn't there anymore, The chief that raises his hand up and down and turns his head. Whoopee.
And do you know what used to be there before they put the shaman telling the story about the woodpecker and the flute?
No.
A moose.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm going way back, but I have film footage that my dad shot, and in that corner was a moose, stationary,
Well,
not doing anything.
They also used to have a guy who was perpetually working on a canoe. Behind the Indian chief was a war party up on the bluffs, but they might be peaceful. And then on the island on the north side, there used to actually be an Indian war party.
Yes.
They
Yeah,
call
I
that
remember
out.
there was like a friendly Indian camp and then a hostile Indian camp.
Right. And it's like, whatever. So change is not a bad thing, in my opinion. You just have to do it the right way. But in a theme park, you have to move forward.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, the thing with Disneyland now too is, once upon a time it was the only game in town. That was a long time ago. When you see what Universal Studios is now with Harry Potter opening this year, Disneyland has to have an answer to that.
Yes. And isn't it intriguing that the person they hired away from Universal developed Spider-Man and did the Mummy ride and actually was part of the initial team for Harry Potter when Disney hired him, and he's the one heading up Star Wars Land.
Interesting.
Scott Trowbridge.
Mm-hmm.
I just find it fascinating.
Yeah. I think it's kind of sad. I have a friend of mine who worked for Disney a long time, recently left the company, and at least once a week, she posts some lamentation about how the company is no longer the way it used to be.
No company is.
And no company is. And I mean, and you can certainly be, nostalgic about the old days, and certainly, you can have an opinion, it was, better then or not, but it's depressing. It really is. Not that she necessarily disagrees with the direction the company's going, but that it seems to have consumed her, and is genuinely upsetting. And that, I think, there's something wrong with that.
When I got out of the business and went into journalism, I actually did not go to a Disney theme park for 4 years.
Okay. I get that.
Part of the problem is people so obsess over all this stuff so much is they lose the sight of what's real out there. And I didn't go. In fact, our first trip was when my youngest child had turned 4, and we went as a family. It was a little bit after DCA had opened, and a friend of mine, his wife worked there, and he's a former Imagineer. And so they signed us in, and we still had some tickets left, and we decided to go. The old tickets would only get us into Disneyland, but because 3 of us were signed in, we could hop over to DCA. I hadn't been to Disneyland in 4 years. And I go, okay, I see what some of the problems are, but I also see how my kids are enjoying it. And I get it again. And I have vowed that even now, as I cover Disney on a daily basis, when I go to the park, I go in on what I need to do, and I go as an observer, and then I leave. If I stick around, I go to a bar and have a drink with somebody. That way, when my family and I try to go once a year or so, I enjoy it. And I think that's one of the things the obsessive fans lose, is that are you really a fan? Are you enjoying it? Or are you there because you think it's your mission to make it right all the time? And if that's what you are, then go be a docent at a museum. They're so obsessed with what they think is to protect Disney from itself. It's like, it's a business. And if you don't change, you're going to be like Kodak.
Yeah.
Kodak
exactly.
invented digital photography, and the old guard, which was doing film, which was still making money, said, why should we do this when we're still making money at film? So they didn't. Well, look what happened. Why should Disney change? Well, I'm sorry, 10 years ago, there weren't as many people going there. When Michael and Frank came in, attendance at Disneyland was going down.
And then look where it is now, where one of the bigger conversations is how crowded the park is year round, constantly.
Yeah, and that's an issue that I think they're working in a direction to make it work better.
Did they shoot themselves in the foot with how they've managed the annual pass holder program?
Well, look up, type in Mark Eades and Jim Hill, and look up at an article I wrote in 2004 for Jim Hill. And let me tell you, a lot of those fan bases and others howled about what I said, but boy, you look at what I wrote way back then, and I was absolutely right on.
And that would be the short version. I'll read the
Basically,
article.
that the annual pass holders become a problem. And I had noticed it that year when we went to the park earlier that year again with family, and I had noticed that, here we were waiting in line. This is before the Fast Pass, right? And we were in line for the bobsled. So my youngest is going to ride the bobsleds for the first time, right? And, as a family, we would talk in the line, right? Like you do. Converse with others. And this, I determined he was an AP-er, started to try to tell me exactly how I should be visiting Disneyland, in what order, and what I should do. And it was almost like a robotic visit to Disneyland. And what I said in the article was, I'm not sure you're enjoying Disney more. You're just doing it because you're supposed to do it this way. Are you really enjoying the park? Are you trying to tell others how to do it because you feel you're so important or something like that? It's like, leave me alone. Let me enjoy the park. If somebody was to say out loud, I wonder how you do this, I'll even say, hey, well, here's the way you can do it, but I'm not going to tell you how to enjoy the park. That's your business. Enjoy the park. Don't try to disrupt what I'm doing as a family and explain to me. I mean, the entire line is explaining to me, well, you should do this way, you should do this that way, et cetera. What's your problem? Now, that said, I think the annual passes have become a problem for Disney, and Disney's finally recognized it. Though they try to claim otherwise, they don't spend as much money in the park. They are a burden. Want to know why Aladdin's going out? Because more than 75% of the people who see it are the same people all the time, annual pass holders.
Yeah.
So you're not making money on what is a very costly show. And the cast members know it, and they are playing to that audience, not to the public at large.
Well, one thing that I'll say it concerns me, even though I understand the mindset and the business approach to it, but it does bother me a little bit, and I'd like to hear your opinion on it. Will Disneyland or Disney parks, will there ever be a great new attraction that isn't built on a franchise? I mean, you couldn't do an adventure through inner space. You couldn't do a submarine voyage, the original submarine voyage, with the mentality and approach that Disney takes today. And is that necessarily a bad thing?
I don't know that it is a bad thing, because these things cost so damn much money that you have to look at a way to make money out of them beyond just, if you were to build a one-off attraction with no other basis for it at a theme park, how does that make you money?
Why did it work then and wouldn't work now?
Because back then it didn't exist and it was a growing business. Now it's an established business. You understand the difference?
Oh, yes. No, I understand. And in asking the question, I already knew the answer.
No, I'm not saying it couldn't be done. It could, but I think if you were to do that, it would be on a smaller scale. And then if it works great, then you can either make it bigger, or you can then take it and turn it into stuff for the other divisions so they can make money off of it. Mm-hmm. In a sense, that's what's happened with some of the old big attractions where, look at what Pirates of the Caribbean has turned into. They tried it with Haunted Mansion. It didn't work with Eddie Murphy because that was a mistake, was hiring Eddie.
We'll see what Guillermo del Toro does with it.
If he gets to do it eventually, yeah. And, they kind of tried it with the Country Bears. That didn't work for a lot of reasons.
Oh, that's a horrible movie.
Yeah.
It was just awful.
But they tried, is my point. And they're going to try it with the Jungle Cruise. Good. And at the same time, I would say, hey, put some of the Jungle Book stuff into the Jungle Cruise. It could use some new stuff.
Yeah.
It's a tough business. I know Ryan Harmon, who I worked with, his company has been working with a company in Indonesia to develop a new theme park, and they're developing new intellectual property, and the whole park's going to be based on that. But they're also looking at taking that intellectual property, because the company that is their client is a media-based company and a real estate development company all in one. So they're looking at having instead of running others' intellectual property on their various media outlets, taking their own stuff and exploiting it. I don't see anything wrong with doing something new. It's just you have to look at how do you monetize that in a good way, going down, 10, 20, 30 years. Mm-hmm. Disney's got some incredible properties with Star Wars and what's come out of Pixar, and I despise the people that say, well, Pixar's not Disney. I mean,
Pixar wouldn't exist without Disney.
Yeah, and the people who are head of Pixar were like the first class out of CalArts, which was founded by Walt Disney for that express purpose.
Some people have observed it, and one of the more normal names that pops in my head is Jeff Curdy. But he observed, just like Marvel and Star Wars and all that if you go back, Alice in Wonderland's not Disney. Sleeping Beauty is not Disney. I mean, these were all existing stories that had nothing to do with Disney, but Disney made it their own.
Yeah, good for them. I mean, it really was. And then people try to claim, well, we should build original rides, not things based on movies. I said, well, what the hell do you think Disneyland was based on except for Main Street?
Sleeping Beauty Castle was named Sleeping Beauty Castle to promote a movie that hadn't opened yet.
Yeah, and Main Street USA was, Walt's idealized Americana, but if you look at a lot of the films he made, they were kind of an idealized Americana for dealing with the problems in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So, he built some attractions that weren't really based on movies. Good for him, but they were. I mean, Mine Train was through Nature's Wonderland. The Jungle Cruise was kind of a way to go to an area that people couldn't go at the time, and
well, it was the True Life Adventures that
it was the
built
True
that.
Life Adventures, and even a little bit of an ode to the African Queen. I mean, Harper Goff was the production designer for the African Queen, for Christ's sake. Yeah, he did Pirates of the Caribbean, which was all new, just pirates. It wasn't really based on a movie, though Walt had done Treasure Island. But so what? You knew there would be a haunted house of some kind at a theme park.
Oh yeah, I mean that was a pretty common practice for amusement parks, and plans for a haunted mansion or a spook house or whatever you wanted to call it. I mean, existed at the time the park opened.
Yeah, and then he built the house and then didn't do anything, and they finally got the thing open in '69, 2 years after he died. But Walt saw a lot of the effects, so that's what fascinates me is that people always want to read into things what they want to read into it, and of course social media has magnified that.
My chat with Mark is part of a much longer conversation he and I had about his career as an Imagineer at Disney, as well as his time at the Orange County Register. I'm happy to say Mark will be back next week to talk about designing Epcot and what happens when you sit and stare at Main Street USA for an entire day. You definitely want to join us then. And that will do it for this edition of the Mouse Castle Lounge. Thank you to Mark Eades and Sam Gennawey for being my guests. Stay up to date with everything going on in the Mouse Castle Lounge. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. You can also download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app, which you can get right now by going to themousecastle.com and clicking Get the App. Anthony Reynolds and I host Inside the Mouse Castle with your weekly dose of Disney news, information, and commentary. Do give us a listen. The Mouse Castle Lounge is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. I just like to talk about him. I'm Tim Calloway. It's been a blast as always, so let's do this again real soon. Take care.